Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. If you like the content, please like, subscribe, and turn on the post notification bell so you'll be informed when I post future content. Now, look, today I want to get into why did Russia invade Ukraine? What is Putin after? And the effects of the war in Ukraine. Now, in order to unpack all of this, we would have to rewind all the way back to 2014. Now, we could go a lot further back, but I'm going to start at 2014. In 2014, Russia tested the water by invading Ukraine to annex Crimea. Now, Crimea serves as a very, very important piece of land for Russia. Now, Putin was a part of the Soviet administration before its collapse in 1991. So Putin watched the downfall of the entire Soviet Republic. So Putin made a vow to not only himself but the Russian people that he would gain back all the territories that Russia lost after the fall of the Soviet Union. Now, Putin took office around 1999 to 2000. And since then, he's had that on his agenda. That's been his goal. He wants to see the Soviet Union restored back to its full and former glory. So he decided to test the waters in 2014. And when he annexed Crimea in 2014, NATO and the rest of the world sat back and kind of watched. They didn't do anything. They didn't provide any assistance. They basically said, that's a border war. We're going to stay out of that. So now we fast forward to 2020, February 2020. Russia said, well, Putin said, okay, NATO and the rest of the world did nothing when I tested the waters in 2014 and took Crimea. So here in 2022, I'm going to go back in and I'm going to not only take Crimea, but I'm going to take the whole of Ukraine. So by NATO sitting back and allowing Russia to do it in 2014, it ushered in 2022. And for the most part, Ukraine always knew this. They knew after 2014 that Russia would be back. Russia would be back to test the waters again. So since 2014, along with the assistance of the United States, Ukraine has been preparing for Russia to return. Now, by this time, the United States plus 40 other countries, with America being the largest donor, provided all types of aid to Ukraine to help fight the war against Russia. Now, that will be in the form of financial aid, humanitarian aid, military aid. Now, Ukraine being a former part of the Soviet Union, a former part of Russia, they share a large border with Russia. A majority of Ukraine's border is Russia. So, in order to get all of this aid in, they have to use European countries like Romania, Hungary, Moldova, Poland. Now, Belarus. Belarus also is a former country of the Soviet Union, but Belarus they continue to be loyal to Moscow. They're not for Ukraine. So aid can, although they share a large border with Belarus as well, Belarus is not with using their borders to provide aid to Ukraine. They're against Ukraine. They're with Russia. So Belarus is out the question. So, like I said, NATO allowed for them to annex in 2014, which ushered in 2022's war. Now, Ukraine has a population of 43 million as of 2021. Russia has a population of 143 million as of 2021. Now, Ukraine exports wheat, sunflower oil, like at least a third of the world's cooking oil, seeds, cast iron, rolled steel, steel pipes, wood, machinery. Now, Ukraine imports refined petroleum, cars, petroleum gas, coal, and Ukraine imports mostly come from China, Russia, Poland, Germany, and Belarus. But now that the war in Ukraine between Ukraine and Russia is going on, you could take Russia and Belarus off that list of providing imports to Ukraine. Now, Russia exports. Russia is like the gas station of the world, as it's been nicknamed, but they provide fuel, energy products, crude oil and natural gas, metals, machinery and equipment, chemical products, foodstuff, and agricultural products. Now, Russia biggest imports is gold, cars, motor vehicles, the parts to the motor vehicles, broadcasting equipment, and computers. Now, Russia gets most of their imports from China, Germany, Belarus, South Korea, Italy, and India. Now, China and India, with the war in Ukraine, have been buying discounted cheap oil from Russia because Russia can't export to the rest of the world via the sanctions. So China and India has been buying Russian oil on the cheap since the start of the war. But Russia can't continue to afford to sell them oil on the cheap. So China and India is basically stockpiling at a discounted rate. Now, this war could last for years. Putin accepting defeat means if he loses the war in Ukraine or he loses Crimea back to Ukraine, that in essence spells the end of Putin. Possibly the end of, well, if Putin goes away, his entire administration goes away. The Russian people will revolt and possibly do the unthinkable to Putin within his own country. Then he won't have to worry about, someone coming from the West to get him. His own people would get him. Now, here's the reason why Crimea serves as such an important piece of land to Russia. Crimea is a peninsula. It's surrounded around the Black Sea. Russia has very little access to warm waters, which is important for trade. Most of Russia's rivers run north to the Arctic, and once it gets to the Arctic, most of Russia waterways basically freezes over. Russia is a pretty cold place, and most of its water runs north to the Arctic and freezes. And anything to the far east is surrounded around Japan and Taiwan, so they don't have access to the full Pacific. So they can't access the open oceans that way. So the only way that Russia will ever have access to warm waters for free trade is by way of Crimea through the Black Sea. That's how Russia is able to export a lot of their products outside of Russia into the rest of the world. So Russia built a multi-billion-dollar bridge to connect Russia mainland to Crimea, and it makes for easier exports. So Russia, in addition to Crimea, so that's what makes Crimea so important to Russia, because in order to be world power or considered a superpower, you have to have a strong navy. And in order to have a strong navy, you need to have access to warm waters. And Crimea allows that for Russia. So that's why Russia decided to go after Crimea in 2014. But by Russia going after Crimea in 2014, as I stated before, NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, this is a group of 30 countries. Mostly, well, I ain't gonna say mostly, but some of the leading nations, you have United States, United Kingdom, Turkey, Spain, Slovenia, Slovakia. Now, Slovenia, Slovakia, Romania, they used to be a part of Russia, but they now joined NATO, which is a Western alliance against the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, which is now Russia. You have Poland, Norway, Lithuania, Latvia. Now, Lithuania and Latvia was also a part of the former Soviet Union. These are all countries that Russia wants back, that Putin wants back. These are all now independent countries, have been for the better part since 1991 when the Soviet Union fell. You have Italy, Germany, France, Estonia. Estonia is another former republic of the Soviet Union. They were once a part of Russia. They broke apart for their own independence. Canada, Bulgaria, Belgium, Albania, all of these countries formed an alliance called NATO. And if any one of these one countries is attacked by Russia or any members or any countries outside of the NATO allegiance, they have what you call Article 5. Article 5 will be enacted. Article 5 tells any country that's within the NATO alliance, if they're attacked, all 30 of these countries will then attack whoever's attacking any member of NATO. So power in numbers, right? So all of these 30 countries are protected underneath the umbrella of NATO. So remember how I just named off at least 8 or 10 former Soviet countries that have joined NATO. They're under the protections of the United States and the rest in Europe and in the Western world. Now you have Ukraine. Ukraine put in an application to join NATO. That also triggered Putin. Putin don't want NATO directly on their doorstep like that. So Putin, in his mind, is willing to do whatever it takes to push NATO or stop Ukraine from joining NATO and push NATO further back into Europe and away from his border. Because all the other border nations that broke apart from the Soviet Union, most of them decided to join Europe. They decided to join the Western world, Western philosophy. They don't take on the beliefs and the traditions of Moscow. They just don't. So Putin has a real big hatred for NATO. So Putin said, no NATO for you, Ukraine, you can't join. So Putin is like now or never, because Putin lost, well, the Russian Federation lost, as I said, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia. Now, Armenia, doesn't that make the Kardashians Russians, or am I tripping? Azerbaijan, all these countries that broke apart when the Soviet Union broke apart. So NATO is a big problem for Russia, and Putin has vowed that under his regime, before he dies, now or never, he will take back every country that was lost to NATO, lost to independence. He wants it all back. Before he leaves this beautiful planet, he wants to take it all back at any cost. And if he loses Crimea and he loses Ukraine, that could mean the end of Vladimir Putin as we know him. In fact, he doesn't have to worry about NATO and the rest of the world because the Russian people will turn on him from within. Now I'll be here to sit back and watch it all. So until next time, thank you guys for watching.